everybody. Welcome to the Femina into Grazia Fashion First virtual event. In the annals of Indian fashion, his name makes the first chapter with a few others. His publicist calls him true man of the world. He has an old school pomposity about him. Intelligence coupled with ability to converse on any topic under the sun. Food, fashion, music, art, literature. Ladies and gentlemen, Tarun Tahiliani. We have him here for a wonderful conversation, which I am particularly very excited about. So my friend Ruchika, when she asked me to do this conversation, I just jumped at the offer because there are just so many things intriguing about this man. And I thought this was my opportunity to get it all out of him. Welcome, Tarun.
Pull it out. Hi, welcome. Nice to be here with you, Harmeet.
My first question, Tarun, what is the present state of mind? 8 months lockdown, I think you're out and about now, but what is the state of mind right now?
Well, I think I got cabin fever in a week, so I kind of roamed around the farms right away. I think that honestly, in spite of all the terrible things that I've seen happen to people, and I'm fearing happening now, because now we're told that jobs have collapsed, families are losing, unable to meet EMIs and fees. And forget what we saw with the, migrant workers and the very poor, which was heartbreaking, like watching partition again. It's now moving up because people are running out of their savings. They're in a very dangerous place and there's a lot of stress. However, for people like us who have, slightly higher up on Maslow's hierarchy and have savings, I have to say we've had to work very hard to stay in the same place or to stop from drowning. But that absolute silence and that forced standing still for 2 months, which we had become so conditioned to never not doing. I mean, even if I went to a spa to detox, I spent 3 hours on my phone every day, checking messages, sending the instructions, and suddenly there was nothing to send. Everything had stopped. The world had stopped. You were forced to stop. Forced to reconnect, and it really was a giant silver lining. It was a blessing in disguise, and I almost feel guilty saying this because I know what so many people are going through. It's not been easy. It's just that we've been lucky and we work very hard, but there's been a forced stillness, and that for any human being is a magic springboard to refire one's engines and start going again, because it has forced me to think about so much that I was doing that I don't think was particularly relevant. I think there were parts of me that were adrift. Running the company to perfection and looking after HR needs of people, become more sensitive. There's no fluff. We're not going to events. We're not going to parties. We're barely traveling. I think it's made me much more sensitive, and I'm working 10 times harder than I ever have. My days are fuller. I'm happier even though my business has shrunk.
Yeah.
And not to sound cliched, but I finally found my mission. And that stillness after so long, we started, which we'll touch upon later, how we started, and the mad fun, incredible ride, and all the mad hatters we knew, and discovering the world and discovering fashion, and, within India, outside, suddenly all this was gone. And it was in the past. It's in your experience. It's in your wisdom, if you like. But that story is over, you know.
Yes, I agree. I know it's been such dark times. I mean, everybody's described it like that. But I think, like you said, there's a silver lining. This is also the pause button that we had never paused on.
And we would never have.
Yeah, we would have never.
We all had our own FOMO in whatever way, whatever it is.
And made us think. I mean, what you're just talking about, the mission, rethink, replan, and replan the way forward. I mean, one would have not done it. One would have been on that roller coaster and maybe just one day flung away from it,
Yeah, falling off, exhausted. Just
yeah. So I think there is a positive side.
On the side,
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, it's hard for a lot of people. And I think at this point of time, the spiritual part of you says gratitude, saying thank you for the food on my table.
Never had more. I mean, made less and never had more.
Yeah.
It's really been a rekindling of, like you said, I mean, spiritual sounds very grand, but just a reconnect with yourself.
Yeah.
You're forced to, you can, in everything in life, you can sink or swim, right? There are people possibly who are not going to come out of this or recover. But everybody in my friend circle, my sister, my own interaction with my own family, because I've been home, because they've been home, is changed unalterably, and it makes you wonder, what the hell was I doing for so long?
Yes.
And it's really taught us that simpler is better.
I just hope we continue to embrace it. I mean, sir, that is a question I ask. And I particularly ask because we are in the fashion industry, is what are we going to embrace? I mean, going forward,
because
maybe...
actually fast fashion, new trends, this whole thing is anti this life we're describing.
Yes, totally,
right? Completely.
Totally, yeah.
But my answer to that is that if we want to be sustainable, firstly, as Indians, we have to move back much more to craft-based things, because it's also social responsibility. We have the millions of people, it's our culture. To make things cheaper, we had moved to machine embroidery, then we moved to Sura, then we moved to this, we moved to that. But that's taking away things from people, right? It's making it mass. Yeah. I think if people really want to sustain the world, the planet, and might I say that David Attenborough's new, last witness of his 70 years of filming is just out, and he said this is our last chance as the human race to save the Halcyon, because all of us survival of one species depends on the ecosystem of everything else. And just because man is so smart, similarly in our society, you can't have just the rich survive. You need everybody to survive. It's going to be hell to pay. It's our responsibility, right, to make sure that people, the governments, but even us. So these methods and these truisms reflect in so many different ways and at so many different levels that, I think for us, people have to buy quality. If you buy quality, you will value it more. You will wear it.
Let me just butt in here for a second. I actually want to take you back from the time that you started, okay? And then we'll walk that journey. And then I think there will be a lot of learnings from that journey as well. So I want to tell our audience, Tarun's father was the Chief of Navy, mother an engineer, sister an investment banker, comes from the family business of oil rigs. Tarun, a Wharton business graduate. What made you walk through these alien corridors of fashion almost 3 decades ago?
Well, it actually sounds very grand. We weren't oil tycoons. It was a small engineering company.
Whatever.
And I went there and I was helping it. My mother used to run it, but she had passed away. And I just was horrified because it was about, all the underhand deals and, it was a different world and I was not interested. And I said to my father, if this is what I have to do to fly first class, I'm not doing it. Anyway, I was always very creative. I liked theater, I liked music. We couldn't think when we were growing up. And India was a textile country. Our mothers wore saris, or at most a shalwar kameez. And it was a beautiful textile country that had come a little down through socialism. But there was a big revival happening in the 80s with the festivals of India and Pupul Jaikar and Martan Singh, wonderful people. So we actually, my wife and me, we were young and quite broke. That's why I don't like the oil tycoon bit, far from it. And she started modeling to help, because we were living literally on a shoestring budget. And one of the things we did, we met Rohit Khosla on a shoot because she was doing the Viman Sari campaign. And it's funny, I was just at the Rambagh Palace last week, and I sent her an image of the sort of like the big fancy dining room. And I said, we were sitting here when the idea of ensemble was born in 1987.
Yes.
Because we'd see a lot of beautiful things abroad that were not available in India. And he said, how odd. 40 years after independence, all the best thing is served up to the white man, whether it's in Tokyo or London or New York. And we used to shop at export rejects, if you remember, on fashion streets. Sarojini Nagar today is
all of that.
They were called fashion streets. It was all export reject. We were in a transition from a textile industry to like ready-made clothing. And, she had this idea after reading this India Today article about why don't we start a store to promote Indian design because such beautiful things. And we started meeting people, and that's how we met. Well, Rohit Khosla we met because of the shoot, and Abu Jaini Sandeep Khosla, who was selling at a lovely boutique, beautiful things in Juhu, and so on and so forth. Suneet Verma, Rohit Bal, all, the older
all your contemporaries,
And this idea was born, and Rohit Khosla sort of became like a godfather because he had worked with Versace, he had worked abroad, and he helped us. We went to see stores abroad. The idea of a simple, minimal shop was born, with space and lighting to see clothes. And unwittingly, a whole movement was born,
Yes.
and it took off like a rocket. Didn't make money in the beginnings. We didn't understand merchandising, but the idea was exciting. It was on the cover of magazines. People were talking about it, and it spawned a whole generation of stores at every level.
Yes.
And a new industry was born that hitherto had been done by a few people like Ravi Song, who were doing a great job, or Beena Modi had a boutique called Obsession. So,
which is the
and it
reason I
was-
say you've been through what I call the renaissance of Indian fashion. I mean, the first multi-designer store when nobody had even heard about most of the designers. It was a certain kind of a retail revolution that you brought about.
Oh, it was such a buzz, yeah.
You doing the first few fashion shows, you launching your collection as a designer. I think you even in the middle moved to New York for a little bit and then came back. There was just so much activity. But in terms of the design ethos, in terms of the sensibility of the Indian fashion at that point of time, I mean, the term that they're using right now, it was the circular fashion. It was really, I'm sure a lot of your clients who bought your clothes then still hold on to them. I mean, they still have them. And this is where it brings us to the concept of sustainability, which is what you started. And I said, for us, it's always been there, but it's now with the advent of, yes, technology, fast fashion, whatever, it's become the trending buzzword. I really want, your take on this going forward. I mean, what does it mean? And what do we need to do? Because to me, there's a lot of talk right now. But I think the 20s has to be the 20s has to be the decade.
It's a superb question, Harmeet. I think, as you said, Indian fashion was always a sustainable fashion.
Yes.
It was all natural.
Yes.
Nobody threw things away. As a textile, you can wear your grandmother's sari even today, and women do. Proudly, that's part of the family heritage. You can alter a lehenga and wear it. And it was not a fashion that changed every few months. That was something in the West that changed every few years. So it went from Georgian to Elizabethan to Edwardian. Then the 20s came, then the war changed fashion, then the 60s came. But since then, when there's been relative prosperity and stability, with the advent of the big department store and the magazine, and of course, global travel, influences came in, but then it also became a mechanism to build markets, to make people change, or, so much of marketing is to make people perceive a need, right? If I think bell bottoms are in and I have to, then I don't want to wear my old trousers, for instance. Now, they might have come out of a real movement, but it somewhere became very blurred. India was never like that. You could wear a shalwar kameez that you bought at Seva 20 years back, even today. Indian fashion was classic. In the 90s, the big revival was embroidery, because being socialist for so long, that whole side had been underplayed. And I didn't know, living in South Bombay, that was such an important part, because in South Bombay, people didn't wear embroidery. But it was exuberant and bursting in what people like Abu Jani did, or even Rohit Bal. And people were crazy for this, and the whole new bridal thing happened. Till then, when we all got married, people wore tissue saris from Kalaniketa. Or Indian textiles had the best textiles. It was simple, but suddenly a whole new world was being born because of this. And then when it came fit, and how does embroidery work with Western shapes and corsetry and, things like, say, Sunit does, or everybody does today. It took years of learning and experimentation. So as we absorb more and more the Western model, and you want to change and be up to date and wear what's latest, naturally things are going to become obsolete much more, or be packed away, and you want to wear the latest trendy things, and these shoes have come in. So we actually, in a way, taken one of the worst things from the West. It's not needed for us. Not that a lot of those clothes are even suitable to our climate if you're going to live in India. But it's a process of bursting out after socialism, of capitalism, money, making money, feeling independent. And we're also, in many ways, because we're so English-speaking in the elitist world in India, we're always looking at the West for ideas. You're not looking at your own culture, because actually, when I look at the younger generation today, they're more familiar what's happening globally in Bollywood. But you ask them, Do you know what a kimbap is, or do you know what chicken? They can't explain where it even comes from.
No,
They've
that
got
is- yeah.
disconnected.
Yeah.
So all these forces are happening at once, but now there's also reverse backlash.
Yeah.
We're
I
all
also
talking.
think sustainability today is really a perspective that you take from, I think, a certain part of the world. The West looks at it differently. They're talking about landfills and incinerating and climate carbon emissions, and we're talking about sustaining our heritage and our culture. My question to you
We
also.
also have the problems of landfills.
No, we do.
also
We do.
have all
That's
of
for sure.
that. I mean,
That's happening. Totally. I totally agree with you. But for
there's
us, I
hillsides
think
growing outside Delhi, if you look,
yeah,
you know.
I know. That's also, but my question to you is, does the consumer understand this? I mean, you interact with that consumer and you interact with them at various echelons. Do they understand sustainability, and are they willing to either pay that extra buck for it or to make that statement? And do you think it's going to happen here soon? Because there is a
I
big
think
question.
there's a little dichotomy. I think when the way men dress, they don't mind repeating something 100 times.
Yeah.
They don't define themselves, and they don't care if 20 other men are wearing the same thing.
Right.
Somehow in the female psychology, in New India, where they're wearing sets and Instagram and this constant thing of showing, and, you know, also something that's been promoted by the press. I always tell the press, you all are responsible for this. And this culture, no Bollywood star can repeat an outfit. So it's sending constantly the wrong messages, right? And it's Indian clothes are much more distinctive than taking a black jacket and mixing into 20 things. So it's easier to repeat something. But in a shalwar kameez or a lehenga, it's a little more difficult because it's one look. So till you're secure enough to wear it multiple times, people feel, oh, I've been seen in this before, right? It's a perversion of consumerist culture with a lot of affluence. Poor and middle class people do not think like
And
this.
totally accentuated today by social media.
Yes, and social media has created havoc.
Yeah.
But when you start buying something of quality, I mean, I've been through every cycle. I was a student, I was washing dishes, then we were broke. You know, then I started buying cheaper things that I'd say, oh, it's cheap, I'll use it, you know.
Yeah.
And now finally, when I buy something that's really beautiful, like a sweater that I love, I want to wear it 1,000 times because of what it feels, and I don't care. And I don't buy
value
things
for money. It's total value for money.
but it's also that's automatically what makes it sustainable. So I keep saying, you're never going to be sustainable buying fast fashion. If 90 billion pieces of clothing are being filled in landfills every year,
Yes.
which is ironic because at least 2-3 billion people don't have enough clothes on their body.
Yes. Yes.
You're not going to do that with a beautiful sweater or a beautiful heirloom piece or a lehenga, even if it's simple or something you love in the finest malmal. It is only quality that's going to make people want to reuse and reuse, where them and the touch on their skin is more important than what the person across the room thinks. That's very nouveau. And in a way, our current avatar is nouveau. And we'll get through it. You know, we're a society on the make, and we've expanded, and there's all this industrial and new money. Where are the old families? I don't think the Rajwadas think they repeat their chiffons all the time. But there's such an elegance, they don't care. So we're a society at many different crossroads, and we can't generalize. But I think quality is the answer for sustainability.
I agree. Quality, and I think what we can also define it as value. I mean, what value you're getting? What is the story behind it? What does it do for me? I mean, I think we need to redefine those values at some level and what they get for us.
Well, I think that's also happening a lot now because Instagram is giving brands access to telling their story, and people are not fools. They can tell what's right or wrong, or, you know, what feels authentic. I think that perhaps magazines were more interested in the imagery, but value is a much deeper thing that has to be talked and understood at a more cerebral level. And I think that is changing. And I see a lot of millennials much more conscious. They'll wear things, you know, fancy things. So they all say, I want to wear it again. I want to use it. If you wear something that's 25 kilos and you can't walk, you're never going to wear it again. If it chobos your skin and you're bleeding, you're going to throw it
away.
Right?
Exactly.
So it is quality and being sensible. And really, as a society, if we give people the ability to feel secure and strong within themselves, then the way they view themselves and what they want to project and how they want to be viewed changes. It's a value system. So values have to change at a very different value, and everything, you know, it's one or the other. So
that also brings me to another thing. I think maybe you started at a time when there were really not PR agencies and nobody really hired PR agents or something like that. So you pretty much started on your own. And then when the first professional came about, you hired them and they worked for you. But I want you to briefly analyze this media journey a little bit. And going forward, what does it mean to a young designer or a young brand?
Well, you see, back then there was so little media and so little to cover that it wasn't difficult to get noticed, honestly, I mean, if you're one fly in a beautiful green lawn, everyone will notice it. But you're the fly in a jungle, hell, no one's going to see you.
Exactly.
So, we did this beautiful brochure. It was a labor of love. Shantanu Shure had shot it. We didn't even have models. Sal, my wife, shot for me. Abu's sister shot for him. When, different people shot. And we sent it to the first magazine, which is Bombay Magazine. And she calls Mohini Bhulla and says, "Oh my God, what is this?" We were on the cover the next week. It was an exclusive story. It was covered and given a sense because there was time and space for newness. We were much simpler. Today, if someone's launching a fashion week, just fast forward, there are 50, 70 shows. Everybody's posting. Everyone's got powerful Instagrams. How the hell, even in this noise, do you ever get noticed? You have to be either really talented or something. And actually, when we got to using PR agencies, it was more because we couldn't process all the requests that were coming in. It was more to organize and, BBC would come from London. They would take us there. They would cover us. It was a super exciting time. And because there was so little, people had the time to sit and look at it. It was less, but very high quality. Now I'm bewildered when I even scroll down the channels.
Yeah.
There are like 300, 400 channels. So what do? I go back to the 3 I watch, out of habit.
Which is really something that, bothers me. I mean, there are students graduating from fashion schools by the thousands, or if not more.
Apparently, it's one of the third most coveted profession in India.
It is. Even today. I mean, my point is that what is your message to these people? What do you have to say to them? I mean, you've seen it all and you're now sitting at a place where, it's a very difficult.
I have only one very simple message. Please don't think it's glamorous. It's glamorous if you love it. It's not the fashion show, which is like 7 minutes after 3 months of ball breaking work. I come to work at 8 o'clock. I've never worked so hard. And I do the 6, even on Saturdays. It's what this profession requires. And it's always been so for the successful Western designer. I remember Donna Karan saying she went into labor in the design room.
Yes.
And she was back 4 days later with a baby and a bosom because she had to get a collection out. Similarly, with a lot of the designers in Europe, Galliano, McQueen, they were working around the clock, It's what you have to do. You do it because you love it and there's nothing else to do. I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I'm done with all these fancy holidays. I'm happiest at work. I will travel to see the world before it's ruined. But you have to do it because you love it and it takes time. Don't come in expecting instant fame. It's not about fame. Fame is always a double-edged sword. You have to do it because you love being in the studio, whether you're printing, embroidery, creating shapes. And it takes years even to develop your own thumbprint.
Yeah,
you don't know.
To truly
it's like a toddler learning to walk. You don't know what they're going to be, a sprinter or a high jumper. It takes years. Be prepared. Try and apprentice with somebody. Make your mistakes and learnings on someone else's time and payroll, But you also will get their wisdom. So, we're in this world of instant. Everyone wants everything instant. Instant fix, instant stamina. And Meher Castellino had a funny spoof in her book about this father saying that, he's going to launch his daughter as a fashion designer and he'll hire a PR company and he'll get, some 3 celebrities and they'll pay a fee and bas ho gaya sab kuch, and he will be famous. It's what people think. I think there's a lot of misrepresentation.
This is happening. A lot of that is still happening. Yeah. No, also coming from that, I think, this instant gratification, that instant happening. What's your take on influencers and bloggers today?
It's an area I have not fully understood because I'm getting the slow fuse. So it'll have to be 4 years. Apparently they're called micro influencers. First it was just Bollywood, but I think maybe they got a bit overexposed and they're sending to a much wider thing. Having said that, if a Karina or a Deepika wears something and, looks very good, there's tremendous interest for years generated by it. I mean, I have to say that. But I don't know, I don't really haven't read that many of the bloggers. But like when I'm in Paris and I look at some of these people coming out of the Far East, especially some of the men with their diamond.
A lot of them over there, yeah.
And they're all these big influencers, and I'm like looking at them and think, I don't want to know what you think. If you come out of the day looking like this,
looking like that.
Then, it's for a different generation. The influencers are not for me. Our cues we take from different things. Anyway, as you're older and wiser, you know more for yourself. Yeah. But for 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, navigating so much. Can you imagine growing up today with such an onslaught of information, technology, 7 different, things, people bombarding you, so much crappy information out all the time. I mean, what people are sharing.
Yeah.
I went to Facebook. I went to Facebook once and I said, that's enough. I've not been back.
We come from an era where we talked about celebrities. And to me, a celebrity is somebody who is celebrated for. Something that they've done, you celebrate.
When you and I grew up, the celebrities dressed themselves.
Yeah, which is what I'm saying. What are we celebrating?
Then they got the stylists. The stylists made it more generic. Now it's gone to another level. And because of that, today the celebrities, most of them, barring very few, don't have a point of view or style. Today they're in some fancy gown, tomorrow they're playing Jodha Akbar, the third day there's something else. Yeah. A celebrity is also meant to represent the point of view. Celebrated for their style, their wisdom, their panache, their acting abilities, even if it's just beauty. It's normally a combination of everything, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a phenomenon we still need to decipher, to decode. I don't know if we will be successful in doing it. Maybe it's for the other generation.
Well, the world always corrects itself in the end, whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
There's some mechanism that, just the fact that the pandemic came along and people have had so much time to think. Besides all the which is most unfortunate, the celebrity bashing that's happened, which I think has been very unfair. But anyway, that's a separate subject. I think people's engagement with this will be different, from now.
I agree with you. Okay, now let me jump on to another area, which again, there's so much to talk, is retail. With the newly minted germophobic, socially distant consumer, go back to offline stores in the same way that they did earlier?
They asked this question in the 90s and said, will people stop having sex because of HIV? Yes, they will go back to stores. They will definitely go back. They're already back in stores. It's just that now they're being more circumspect and coming in when they have a very important function. They're not going, if you were getting married, you'd be out in the store. But if you're not, you're chilling at home. Everything's happening at home. You don't need to go back to stores. Plus, you have the advent of a phenomena of online retailing and the Amazons and everybody else, where literally anything, including if you want a pair of Chanel boots, is at your fingertips. So the need is not there. It's in a huge crunch because it's only people. We're doing a big promotion tomorrow in Bombay at Ensemble, and we followed all protocols. We've done 3 giant shoots with 90 people. Every protocol, for not one person has been sick, except in the one shoot that, and this, you can't control where people come from. So it is now only when people absolutely need to go. But you're a woman, what is retail therapy if you can't touch something and try it on and get advice? Virtual everything is never going to replace the real thing.
I just think it's the experience. I cannot experience that clicking my computer.
The stores are getting better and better, and the way people are being handled.
Which is what I'm curious. Is there something that you are building into the store or working towards at Ensemble, which would enhance the experience for the customer, really?
To be honest, right now, it's too soon to have done that. We're just really being more rigid about protocol and spacing people and making sure that they're distanced and safe. And we've got UV sprays and certain sprays to disinfect clothes if someone tries it on, right? But even that seems to have, people are not that concerned. If you keep your hands sanitized and you keep yourself masked, that's 95% of the game. And of course, they take temperature and all. But we will, going forward, be able to let you watch things being tried virtually, but you need to get scans, so it's on your body. All these technologies are underway. But luxury is about touch.
It's about personalized
Yeah, but how it feels on your skin, I might love it and you might not. And
Yeah.
it's both are equally correct, you know. How it looks on you, you might like certain. So I think it's a temporary thing. I think retail will go to another level because so much will be bought online, but people will go back to stores. Maybe there won't be that many stores, or stores will offer many more services. Look, when things are done, you have to become much more creative. All this will happen, which benefits the customer, and also pricing parity, because you just have to go online. They say, "Arey, ye Dubai mein hai, this is your," you know, they're not prepared to pay more. So,
Which is my
the
question.
internet,
Has the consumer changed? I mean, in terms of pricing, of course,
my
he wants
God.
more
So
competitive, right?
they pay for quality. They're aware of quality. Every young girl comes in and she knows exactly what she wants. I saw
Yeah.
this. I saw this which girl wear this. This looked amazing. I saw Karina and this sharara. That's it. Just tuck, 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 tuck.
Yeah.
Then they look. But they know when they come why they're even coming, which is why your communication and Instagram and storytelling is so important. Um, and the press still plays a very important role because they disseminate information on their. I mean, I was just talking to one of the other publications, and between their three or four things, they're talking apparently to 20 million people. That's not a mean, and across the globe, you know, Indian diaspora. So I think that it's sad if you have to live in a virtual world.
Very
There was
sad.
a film when I was a child, well, teenager, dude, I just resaw it, called Soylent Green, about how the world had fallen apart. And Charlton Heston plays this thing where to die, they go into this IMAX kind of theater and they play the music they want and they play images of the fields before pollution and all. I hope we don't get to that.
Yeah.
So, you
That's a
know,
scary one.
each
Yeah.
step you give up. I mean, simple pleasures like just sitting out in a dhaba and eating doesn't have to be fancy. You
I
know,
think
driving on
this
a
is
road.
something we are valuing way more right now, having been locked in for the last few months.
I have to say, I valued it for a long time. All my trips are much simpler now. You
Road
know,
trips
I'm
and
done with
things.
the
Yeah.
disco. It's
Yeah.
museum and theater and things like that. But I mean, I hope I'm done with disco. Imagine if I was into the
Now you
disco.
can go back to it again all the time. Okay, quickly coming to the next topic, Ahilya. I also want to hear about your going into interiors and really Tarun Tahilyani 25 years from now, the house. What else is on the mantle, and what else are you planning?
Well, you know, the thing is that most of our things, because I didn't plan on being in design and I didn't study design till later, which was more to get technically up to speed, which is where I used to hang out with your adorable sister who used to,
Yeah.
you know, became very thin and skinny because I used to eat all her food.
Chicken.
Basically, what happened is that, you know, we got into home by chance because I started doing my own homes and they were featured, and you know, I love it. I actually wanted to be an architect and I couldn't be because I couldn't understand physics or chemistry, which was mandatory at that time. So, you know, water finds its level. I've got back into working with architects and doing some home. It's a small little division. We're doing some beautiful homes and they're very much celebrating India modern craft. We do use a few things from abroad, mostly in furniture, but we're working at a level with some of the most amazing craftsmen in India. And that to me is super exciting. We're also now going to do a new project, which is more mass oriented, because I think in this constant pressure to be with the other designers, we've all gone up into this, you know, craft madness. But I really want to do accessible fashion. It's what I wear. I think it's more real. I love the draped form, as you know, more than embroidery.
That's
And
your
it's
hallmark,
really
yeah.
the Indian visual is a country that drape things. And if you don't know how to drape, then we will structure the drape. That's our identity, as Little Tailoring is Italians, you know.
Absolutely.
So we want to do that. We're working much more with fabrics because now even the weavers have become more savvy and are constructing for tailoring, as opposed to when I used to work with Maheshwar in the past, everything we make would tear the armhole. They were not woven for that, you know. And we didn't have the solution. I was
It was
not a
only
textile.
sarees. Yeah. Yeah. They
So it's super exciting. I think this whole idea of an India modern identity is becoming more and more crystallized in my head. We were brought up very westernized and were really cheesy wogs, if I might say that. And I don't want to live anywhere else. I don't want to work anywhere else. It's too exciting what I see and what the possibilities are. to bridge our world, the Western world, the world of Indians. And, experience is a great thing. I think that's why a lot of designers are working into their 80s, because they have something you get in your hand. It's not about being young and trendy. It's about understanding the body, understanding fit, its place in culture. That's what I want to do. So I definitely want to do much more accessible fashion, accessible home. I want to use my knowledge and in a very personal way to develop my idea of what a lifestyle should be. There'll be many different versions of that, as there are in Western brands. This is mine. And,
do we see some kind of archiving of Tarun Tahiliani over the years? I mean,
It's funny, because we were doing 25 years and we were doing a book, which so we were forced to look at so much imagery and try and archive it. And we're starting on the 1st of November.
Oh, lovely. Because, this is a treasure.
A formal archiving system with Pramod, who does, those wonderful shows. And, for patterns, embroideries, everything that hopefully will, somebody can use going forward. Because all these great Western brands have, and so much has already been lost. I mean, that we're not going to get back. I know,
exactly. That's the thing. Hold on to what you have now. Even if we start archiving now, it would take a time to do it.
But luckily, because of
treasure.
Luckily, because of Fashion Week starting in 2000, at least there's a lot of photographic documentation.
That's available,
So where this thing, and our patterns were simpler then,
Much simpler,
Now it's getting more complex. No, it's all being done.
So that's wonderful. And I also see, you've been talking a lot about craft, and I see that craft now going into your architectural projects and things like that. It would be interesting to see if there's something that would come up even with the craftsmen, the artisans, a foundation, which would be supported,
what I want to do in that regard, first and foremost, having watched the horrors of post-pandemic lockdown and all these people fleeing, and, this whole idea of daily wage laborers who are starving 3 days after a lockdown, right? And it might happen again. And that terrible insecurity, not that they're not hardworking or they're not talented, but it's their life, is that I really want to start, we talked about it, and there's some friends, centers where we can start training people for free for 3 months or 5 months in embroidery, in finishing, in the things that we have mastered. Because they can then go on and take jobs anywhere. And if they're trained by an institute that we back for no profit, I think it'll help a lot of them at least have some self-respect and sustain themselves. But it's going to mean a lot more people doing simpler things, using Indian craft. Others, you'll just become a machinist at attaching collars. And that's also mind-numbingly boring, When I see the finisher who's doing a flower on a thing, there's greater life in her, than someone just sitting attaching collars, because it's efficient. We have to think about what life and efficiency and quality of life for people means. Because, of course, that's more efficient, right?
Yeah, and on that note, I want to take you on your views on education, on fashion education. I remember talking to you about it because you went to fashion school after Wharton and you studied. You hire people from fashion schools all the time. I've been in a fashion school teaching for 15 years of my life. But I just feel that the schools this time have lagged behind. Normally, education is supposed to be ahead of the game, but
for what reason? Because they've become money-making things. Not the NIFTs, though. I think that when NIFT was set up with FIT, and some of the people who taught me there were superb. They taught here, but I don't know why NIFT discontinued that collaboration so fast and sent them packing. Because the difference in America and India for vocational training is that the woman who taught me draping, Linda Friedman, you might have even known her.
Linda Friedman,
She had trained people. She was a draper for 30 years. Somebody from Dior was teaching evening wear, Professor Badea. The illustration people were illustrating by day for Calvin Klein and taking classes at night. So they were hands-on. Now in India, the Master Gs and all who are not trained speak Hindi. They'll never be put into this English school. I don't even see an embroidery course. So, and I know you were
exactly. My point is embroidery course.
You were young to teach things, and at least you're intellectually interested. But the people who taught over there were people who did it for 20, 30 years before they taught. It was in their hand, in their skin, the pattern makers. Here, the technical skills are done by another, so to say, class. And now we're thinking, even in the factory, we've got to bring more artisans up to run things, not just for English-speaking people who come from NIFT or Pearl,
Yeah.
because there's a different depth here.
They have to be upgraded at some level.
I've learned embroidery only from the Karigars.
Yeah.
All my knowledge has come from them. I've looked for 10 minutes at the Lesage book. And they're masters. But who's documented it? The techniques and all. So we have to take it from the vernacular and make it the way that people learn it. So others, we're not going to learn about our skills. We're going to replace it. The craftsmen in India are superb. And now they're learning draping. They're learning things that were not normally part of us. Of course, the weaving is amazing. The embroidery in this country is mouth-watering. It makes tears to your eyes that people can sit there and do this.
Still do that, yeah.
The whole world comes to India to embroider.
Absolutely.
But they're still treated like basic karigars.
Yeah, and look what happened to them after this pandemic. It's been really, really sad. Most of them are out of job, except people like you who still have your people. They've been thrown out and, in a bad shape.
But even we've lost a lot of people because also as migrant labor, they've run away. They're scared. They'll be thrown out of their houses tomorrow. What if they test COVID? There has to be a policy, right? Now, of course, people are a little more relaxed, but they ran. What was that mass migration on foot? For what?
Tell me, Tarun, what do you feel post-pandemic? I mean, we are still in it.
We're very much in it.
How many of the fashion people will really survive? I mean, internationally, governments are supporting businesses. They are funding them. They are paying salaries. We don't have any such infrastructure over here.
Well, we have lots of rhetoric that keeps coming out.
Yeah.
I can't say how many will survive. The thing is that over here, people also work with much lower expectation of salaries. And also overheads can be kept very small. And you can almost go into, like something germinating, for winter and then come into flower again, I think. So some will go out. People who are not serious will go out of business, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Your auntie variety designer making
who
copies.
Who won't survive, yeah.
And that's good. I hope a lot of the design talent survives because there's a lot of very nice things being done at the moment. Everyone's going to suffer. Everyone is suffering to some degree. You can't help it. It's getting through. Look, France was shut down when Paris was occupied for 5 years by the Germans, Second World War, right? Yeah. Then they started spluttering back to life. Chanel shut for 9 years. Yeah, and talent and the desire to create beautiful things will always come back in some form or the other. And luckily, Indians as a race are highly shocking. We love beautiful things.
Yeah, we love
So if we start buying things that are Indian, without meaning to be jingoistic, rather than just buying cheap stuff from all over the world that's made as a copy, it'll help our people. We have to help our people.
That brings me, what do you think of the big fat Indian wedding? Has it become lean and will it continue to be lean or for how long?
I think it was very good for all us designers and it's apparently supported. That's the most giant industry across food, jewelry, entertainment, hotels, blah, blah, blah. But my own experience of these has been exhausting. Even attending them, it's too big and impersonal and sensory overload. And it's not for me to judge. If people want to do that, that's fine. It's because we also as a culture don't have museum openings and galas and things that people in the West go to, It's this one thing that people are now stretching out for 2 months, 3 months because it's such a party.
Yeah, I think for most Indian families, it's the biggest festival of their life, which goes on.
And you put everything into it.
Yeah,
so again, like we said earlier, it's about, where you are on the life cycle of wealth and exposure and your own thing. A lot of people have made it very small. My goddaughters have insisted on 200 people when they got married. Not that they couldn't afford. They didn't even want to wear necklaces on their Sangeet. So I'm seeing a very new, amazing generation of kids who want to have fun, but it's very contained and sensible. It's not to show anybody anything. But it's always going to be a million mutinies.
There will be an evolution there also, a gradual one. Okay, I think we're running out of time now. I have quick few questions for you. If one-word answers would be great. You can make it 3-2. If not a designer, I would have been?
Architect.
The style icon you admire the most?
Jackie Kennedy, Gayatri Devi.
New kid on the block in fashion?
That's a tough one because there's so many.
So
I don't think you can call Amit Agarwal a new kid. I like what 1111's doing now. Love.
they're doing some beautiful stuff, and this is it. What inspires you?
So many different things in life. Life.
Life inspires.
I mean, I quote JJ said that many years back. Give him credit for it, but there's so many aspects to life. I could be on the street, the sunset, architecture, I mean, everything. The joy of life, really.
I know you've dressed celebrities across the globe, but one person who you would still like to dress?
Oh, I'd like to dress. I love dressing Carly Cross. She was amazing. Who would I like to dress? I actually have no particular, Kate Winslet's a great actress who I could chat with while I was dressing, more than the dressing.
Yeah, it would be the conversation, which would
It'd be the
more-
conversation.
Yeah, which would be more attractive.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think drives the Generation Z and millennials?
The millennials, from what I see, a lot of them have had it very easy and they have a lot of information. So I think they're a little sluggish, if you like, because you can sit on 1,000 things, you're watching. The next generation, I honestly have no idea. I barely know anybody who's, in their teens now, because all my kids and my friends' kids are now late 20s, early 30s. So I can't say, but I just hope that this pandemic has been used as a reflective time for all. Because wherever you are in life, everyone needs some kind of rejigging.
A pause button and the rejig.
I mean, take that as a great, if you're not starving, if you can't feed your family, if you don't have any of those things, use it as a blessing.
Okay, let me also end with your state of mind now.
I have never been more calm in my life. I wouldn't say I'm Zen, but I'm calm. I'm in the center of this wheel of life, and it'll turn this way and that. And I'm loving it because I'm, for the first time, being able to be stuck in the middle, sort of. Maybe a little faults here and there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tarun.
It was
I could
great
go
talking
on
to
for
you.
an hour, but I have a constraint on time, but I'm sure I'm going to get you on another chat very soon.
I look forward to it. It was wonderful talking to you, really.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tarun. And for all our audience out there, please join us on femina.in for webinars, conversations, masterclasses, and lots of interesting information on fashion at the Femina into Grazia Fashion First virtual event. Thank you so much for joining in. This is Harmeet Bajaj.